Jimmy Washington, a 13-year-old boy and the son of the new chief of police in town, was walking to his grandmother's house in the Oakwood neighborhood. Jimmy loved his grandmother's home. It was his favorite place, always filled with the smell of freshly baked cookies and warm hugs. As he walked, Jimmy noticed two police officers walking slowly behind him. He didn't think much of it at first. Oakwood was safe, and the police were supposed to protect people. But the officers kept creeping closer, almost like they were tracking him. He glanced back once, then again, and saw the two officers staring directly at him. Officer Grant and Officer Baker had stern expressions on their faces, the kind that made people feel scared. Jimmy felt uneasy. He wasn't sure why they were following him, but he felt something wasn't right. Without stopping, he quickly took out his phone and called his father, who had just recently become the chief of police in the very same precinct these officers worked. Jimmy's father, Chief Andre Washington, always told him, "If you ever feel unsafe, call me right away." That very day, those words felt real. As Jimmy continued walking, the police officers finally sped up and called for him to stop right there. They didn't smile or ask Jimmy any friendly questions. Instead, they looked at him suspiciously, as if he didn't belong. "Hey, kid," Officer Grant said gruffly. "Where do you think you're going?" Jimmy swallowed hard and replied, "To my grandmother's house, sir. It's just down the road." But the officers didn't seem to care. They started asking Jimmy all sorts of unnecessary questions. They wanted to know why he was walking in the neighborhood where he lived, and even demanded he show them what was in his pockets. Jimmy was confused and scared. He kept thinking about his dad and hoped he would arrive soon. Then, before he knew it, Officer Grant started searching through Jimmy's pockets without permission. He wasn't holding anything suspicious, just a little box with the scarf he'd bought for his grandma. Still, they continued treating him like he'd done something wrong. Jimmy's fear grew, but he tried to stay calm, knowing his father was on his way. Back at the precinct, Chief Washington's phone buzzed with Jimmy's call. Seeing the call from his son made him pause, as Jimmy rarely called him during school days or visits to his grandmother. Hearing his son's quiet, worried voice on the other end, Chief Washington's heart tightened. Jimmy told him about the police officers following him, and the chief wasted no time. He jumped into his car and sped toward Oakwood, hoping he'd get there before anything worse happened. Meanwhile, on the street corner, Officer Grant and Officer Baker were still questioning Jimmy. Officer Grant's tone was harsh as he continued to press Jimmy with questions. "Young man, kids like you shouldn't be wandering around here. Are you carrying anything illegal?" he asked, peering down at Jimmy with a fierce gaze. "No, sir," Jimmy replied, his voice steady but his hands trembling. Officer Baker, the younger of the two, was watching but didn't say anything. He seemed unsure, but he followed Officer Grant's lead. They continued to hassle Jimmy, ignoring his repeated attempts to explain he was simply visiting his grandmother. As the officers spoke, Jimmy noticed a familiar black car pulling up at the corner. His dad's car. Relief washed over him, and just as Officer Grant was about to ask another question, Chief Washington stepped out of his car and walked toward them. Both officers turned, surprised to see their chief in casual clothes, his face stern. "Chief Washington, sir," Officer Grant stammered, realizing who was standing before him. Chief Washington's face showed no hint of friendliness. He looked down at his son, then back up at the officers. "Would one of you care to explain what's going on here?" he asked, his voice firm. The officers exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. Officer Grant, now pale, struggled to find words. "Chief, we thought he was suspicious, sir. This young man didn't look like he belonged around here," he muttered, avoiding Chief Washington's gaze. Chief Washington's voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the disappointment in his eyes. "Suspicious?" "My son was suspicious," he asked slowly. "This is my neighborhood. He's visiting his grandmother just down the road." Officer Baker's face fell, realizing the gravity of their mistake. "Sir, we didn't know," he mumbled. The chief took a step closer, his eyes never leaving theirs. "You didn't know? You never even asked." "You assumed," he said, his words sharp. "Tell me, does a young boy walking to his grandmother's house really look like a threat?" Both officers stood silent, clearly uncomfortable under his piercing gaze. "From now on, you will treat every single person in this community with respect, just as you would want your family treated," Chief Washington continued. "Today, you two crossed a line." The officers nodded, regret clear on their faces. Chief Washington looked back at Jimmy, giving him a reassuring nod. "Let's go, son," he said, placing a hand on Jimmy's shoulder. As they walked away, Jimmy felt proud of his father. Justice had been served, and the officers learned a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. They had bullied the wrong kid, and now they knew the price of assuming too much. The chief knew this wouldn't change everything, but it was a step toward making Oakwood a better, fairer place for everyone. And this brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.